Good day, folks, and welcome to the Anorak Review Show with our host, the Anorak. Time to look at another album by French electronic house duo, Daft Punk. While last year we celebrated the 20th anniversary of their second album Discovery, which is often considered by many to be their bestest album. Also next year would mark the 10th anniversary of their fourth and last album, Random Access Memories, so I'll definitely cover that someday by then. For now though, in a few weeks' time, it will be the 25th anniversary of their first album, but I wish to set the stage and go into a bit of the history of the album and the band as a whole. Back in around 1992, Guy Manuel and Tomás Bongolta were part of an indie punk rock trio called Darlin', spelled with an apostrophe instead of a G, and it was named after a Beach Boys song. Alongside Laurent Brankowitz. They made and even released a song or two, but apparently a review from the Melody Maker magazine didn't really think much of it, dismissing it as daft punky thrash. So that band were kinda short-lived, with Laurent eventually forming the indie synth-pop band Phoenix, while Tomás and Guy Manuel would go on to take on a much different musical direction. In 1993, the two would decide to form a new group of themselves, a dynamic duo if you will, and adapt a particular phrase from the review they had into Daft Punk. They played with a few synthesizers and drum machines, eventually produced a demo tape out of it, and gave the tape to Scott McMillan of Scottish DJ duo Slam and co-founder of Soma Quality Recordings. And supposedly they gave such to him in a rave at Euro Disney, aka Disneyland Paris of all places. Imagine, the only Disney park I ever been to so far is Disney World Resort in Florida. Otherwise, I've been to Legoland in Windsor and Universal Studios Orlando. So try to imagine making a bunch of demo tracks, taking such with you to one of those theme parks, and just happening to meet a DJ and offering them your kind of a portfolio, if you will, thus sparking your whole musical career. Gotta admire the luck in that. And so, by the mid-90s, Daft Punk signed a deal with Virgin Records to license and release their singles and tracks. Now, a thing to note about Daft Punk is that at this time, they'd been a bit hesitant and kind of concerning about signing with record labels, wanting some genuine sense of freedom and creative control over their music. Which is something I think any up-and-coming musician and artist, including myself, can find very relatable. Another note is that apparently they made most, if not all, of the songs here without actually planning a whole album out of it. They were just intended to just be a collection of potential singles to be released one by one, but when the duo realized they have made so many tracks within a few months, they decided to just put them all in one big balanced out package, thus the album we got today. The title of it actually refers to how Daft Punk actually made the songs at home, quick, cheap, and spontaneous. Still, lucky them I guess. I could barely manage to make any music out of my Arturia Mini Lab keyboard. So anyways, let's dig into Daft Punk's 1997 debut album, Homework, and hear how well it has aged after 25 years. Beginning the album is Dafton Direct, and right off the bat, it definitely does set the mood for the rest to come. The constant repeating line of "the funk back to the punk, come on," starts out as being muffled, distant, and almost EQ'd out, as if we're hearing this from outside a club. Then the looping vocal, either from Tomás or Guy Manuel, I don't think it's ever confirmed who or which it was from exactly, soon fades into proper sound, much nearer and clearer, like we're actually entering the club itself. Then around 40 seconds in, we get some nice funky drums, and eventually some tappy bass synth as well. The percussion here we would eventually hear in another song we'll get to very soon. Supposedly this was, or is, actually and technically a live track, an excerpt from an early live performance of Daft Punk in a music event called I Love Techno in Ghent, Belgium back in '95. Which part of the song was from then, be it the looped vocal line itself or the track as a whole, I don't really know. I also don't entirely know what the word daft and direct actually means, but it probably means something in French. I don't know. I'm sure someone else out there might know the answer to that. It then seamlessly segs into WDPK 83.7 FM. In case you couldn't tell from the title, this 28-second track is pretty much a send-up and throwback to the classic FM radio stations and the charismatic DJs that would host them at the time. And I think we still have some of those to this day, come to think of it. Steve Lamacq, Mark Riley, Craig Charles, Chris Evans, Chris Moyles, just to name a few off the top of my head. This too starts with a repeating line, the simple word of music in a similar vocoder fashion. This is likely sampled from another Daft Punk song that was made back in the mid to early 90s that didn't really make it into the album itself, called, well, Music, which itself became the B-side to a song that I will touch into in a moment. But anyways, we then get the quote-unquote host. The host comes in speaking the name of the song and station and announces the exclusive Daft Punk album, Homework, work, 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 work. Because echoes mean dramatic, I guess. But he refers to it as the sound of tomorrow, the music of today, which is quite honestly a fitting term to sum up Daft Punk's music. They take sounds of the future and make it into the music of the present. And as with the previous song, I couldn't really find out which of the duo actually speaks the line here, if it was even either of them at all. Part of the title, WDPK, may have some sneaky cleverness meaning to it. The DP obviously stands for Daft Punk, while the WK comes from the Homework title. Okay, it's not exactly deep, I'll admit, but it's still there. The 83.7 part, on the other hand, well, looking upon researching FM radio frequencies and all that, and I could be a bit inaccurate on this, and if so, do feel free to correct me on it, but it'd be somewhat rare in real life for any radio station to be reached that low. The lowest I could round it to, at least here in the UK, is about 87 to 88 megahertz, and the maximum is about 108 megahertz, 88 to 91 FM and all. Maybe it works differently in France or in other countries, but I also did find out that Japan apparently seems to have a generally lower frequency, from 76 to 95 megahertz FM. So I guess this 83.7 radio is coming from there, or could be reached from there. Although apparently, considering how Daft Punk would eventually collaborate with a Japanese artist to produce an anime film based on one of their albums, it's likely. But regardless, this alongside Daft and Direct do fantastic in setting the tone of the album. It's creative and it's clever, and I do like to see and hear some other albums begin in such a similar manner. After that, we transition to Revolution 909, fourth single of the album, or technically fifth, I'll get into that later. This has a pretty steady beat to it, and it has a pretty interesting opening as well. The sounds of people chatting and muttering as they're entering and attending a rave of sorts. But soon enough, the sounds of police sirens creep in, immediately giving off the sense of immersion and tension. Then a deep voice calls on a megaphone, "Stop the music and go home. I repeat, stop the music and go home." To which immediately people react with stock hysteria sound effects. This bit is apparently an allegory for the French government and its approval against club parties at the time. To quote Thomas, "I don't think it's the music they're after, it's the parties. They pretend it's drugs, but I don't think it's the only thing. There are drugs everywhere, but they probably wouldn't have a problem if the same thing was going on at a rock concert, because that's what they understand. They don't understand this music, which is really violent and repetitive, which is house. They consider it dumb and stupid." Unquote. So naturally, with this in mind, the first thing you think of when you hear and listen to this violent, repetitive, dumb, stupid music are tomatoes. Yeah, seriously, that was the subject of its music video. A police officer breaking up a rave after eating some of Mum's spaghetti. Nice. Plus, being directed by Roman Coppola, yes, the son of Francis Ford Coppola himself. Whew. I gotta say, talent and even a bit of sense of humour do run well in the family. The title itself, aside from referring to a revolution against authorities being strict on music, as well as possibly a nod to those Roland TR drum machines like the 909, 808, 707, etc., is also likely a nod to two Beatles songs, Revolution or Revolution 9, and One After 909. With that in mind, I imagine the stop the music and go home bit doesn't say anything backwards like "Turn me on, Robot Man" or something. Then we get to one of the more famous songs of the album, the first single, hell, even released nearly 2 years before, and the one that put the French duo on the map before One More Time. This is the track, "The Funk." It's one of Daft Punk's most famous songs, and it's easy to see and hear why so. Aside from reusing the similar percussion from Daft and Direct and WDPK, it has a distinct descending wah-wah guitar riff and a murky bass line produced with the Roland TB-303 synth, both of which that anyone can find instantly recognizable. Essentially, this is Daft Punk's attempt to capture the mood, tone, and style of the then recent and popular and trendy gangster and hip-hop music of the 90s. I kind of wonder if the 90s kid or 90s dude even enjoys this song as much as I do. I'm sure he'd have some good taste too in music. Less so with comics, but I digress. And of course there's the familiar music video about our favourite anthropomorphic crippled dog, Charles. So Daft Punk were kind of furries before it was cool, assuming Charles even had any fur considering the costume and mask, wandering about the city of New York while carrying a boombox with a broken volume button while it's permanently playing the song out loud. Clever use of diegetic music, by the way, of the song itself. And it's directed by Spike Jonze, who would go on to direct Being John Malkovich, adaptation starring Nicolas Cage, the film version of Where the Wild Things Are, and the Joaquin Phoenix Scarlett Johansson starring Her. Once again, great and fantastic directorial talent. Though, between this and Where the Wild Things Are, Spike sure likes stories about anthropomorphic animals that turn out to be depressing by the end. Like the song itself, the video really captures the gritty atmosphere of NYC and its big city nights. And this is coming from someone who has never been to the state of New York. At all. The song itself does make you feel like you too are lost and wandering in this vast and crowded city. If you ever been to these into such a capital, imagine if you live in a certain country and you have a capital city like New York or DC, London, Edinburgh, Belfast, or so on. If you ever wandered around in such a city late at night, you'd probably get such a feeling here. All in all, The Funk is such a darn bloody good song and an all-around funky tune.